In our tech-savvy world, many of our communications are online. Cell phone gadgets, tablets, and laptops have opened up our world to a wealth of communications. Using platforms such as credit cards has become a way of life for most of us. Whether withdrawing cash at an ATM, using our cards to pay groceries, or paying for utilities. There's no doubt that bank cards are a convenient way to get your money from scores of commercial banks in Botswana and the hundreds of ATMs across the country. Although it is generally safe, with almost 100% of millions of transactions occurring without incident each year, and while many banks continue to work hard to protect consumers from fraud, unfortunately, these cards have also made us vulnerable to a plethora of online threats and fraud. But there are some simple steps that you, the consumer, can take to protect yourself. I am Nametso Sibina. Welcome to First Issues. But before we get to that, what can you, the consumer, do to minimize your chances of falling victim to these criminals? Our guest this evening, Kate Harriman from Consumer Watchdog, first shares with us the different types of fraud that have engulfed commercial banks.
There's a lot of fraud going on at the moment in terms of debit card fraud. And there are several ways that criminals are actually stealing the information that customers have on their debit cards to either reproduce a new card or to actually steal the card itself. One of the mechanisms criminals are using is what's called card skimming. And what happens is they can do this in two ways. One is they can put a device on an ATM. So when the customer puts their card into the ATM, it actually copies the data on the card. So they've now got the information to reproduce another card. What they also do is have a hidden camera somewhere near the ATM or on the ATM itself. So when the customer enters their PIN number, they've then captured the PIN number. So now they've got the information to produce a new card as well as the customer's PIN number. They can then go out shopping, basically, using the information they've gained from the customer. The other way card skimming often happens is in a store. So you'll give your card to a store assistant. What these criminals do is they actually go around and they recruit people working in shops, and they offer to pay them for every card that they skim. So basically they'll give the person working in a shop or a hotel or a garage or whatever a handheld device, and what happens is when you hand your card over, they swipe the card through the device. Now they've copied it, and they're standing there watching you put in your PIN number on the point of sale, or they've got a hidden camera as well in the store somewhere where they can record the PIN number. So again, the criminal's able to go out and actually shop to their heart's content on your card.
The viewer at home may be wondering how big a problem bank card fraud really is. This too is a question we asked our guest.
I've actually got the figures for South Africa. I don't have figures for Botswana, although we're trying to find out if there are any central statistics. In South Africa, the banks report 70,000 incidents of card fraud every single month. That's 97 incidents per hour. It's very serious. And it's not just a problem in Africa, it's a problem worldwide, and it's a problem that all banks have been facing. And what banks are trying to do is introduce new technology to try and minimise the risk of card skimming. One of the other ways that criminals actually get your card is they do what's called ATM jamming. So they put a device in the ATM that captures your card. So when the customer goes to the ATM, they may get their money out, but the card doesn't come out afterwards, and they think the ATM swallowed it, but in actual fact, it's been captured by a separate device. The crook comes along after the customer and removes the card, and again, they've got their PIN number because they've either been standing behind the customer watching them enter their PIN, or that again, they've put hidden cameras on the ATM itself. One of the other big areas that crooks are targeting is obviously online banking. So if you have internet banking, they'll try and get your information so that they can actually log on and steal your money via using an internet banking service. And one of the ways they do this is called phishing, and it's not phishing on the choby with a rod and some bait. They'll actually send you emails pretending to be the bank, and they'll ask you to click on a link. And that link will take you to what looks like the bank's website. And I've actually received these emails myself. And it's taken me like 1 second to go, hang on a minute, this is not safe, this is a duplicate, it's a copy of the bank's website. So one of the advice we give customers is never ever click on a link in an email. And also never give information away on the phone, because crooks will often, they'll phone you. They'll find out your phone number and they'll phone you pretending to be your bank. One of the things I didn't mention on the ATM security is sometimes you'll find that crooks are actually near the ATM when they've skimmed you, and that they'll actually pretend there's a fault with the ATM and they'll say, give me your, we'll phone the call centre to cancel your card for you, when in fact they're actually not phoning the call centre at all. So you think your card's been cancelled, but they haven't. But criminals will use every opportunity to try and steal your money. And as I said, phishing is one very easy way. So be careful about the information you give out on the phone, and also be careful about responding to emails. If someone pretends to be from the bank and asking you for your PIN number on the phone, hang up. Just tell them to go away, because a bank official would never ever ask you for that information over the phone. If my bank actually does phone me, I actually phone them back myself. I won't even speak to them, because I want to make sure that that person really is who they are and who they, and from the bank that they say they are. Cash trapping, yes. That's another way of actually just collecting money. It's not collecting the card, but criminals will put something over the cover of the where the money comes out on the ATM. So when the customer puts their card in and asks for money, it looks like no money's actually been issued by the bank, but in actual fact it has. Once the customer's left the ATM, the crook goes, takes the cover off, and there's the customer's money. So it's another way that it's happening. But I also didn't mention there are things that banks are doing to try and make our money more secure. And one of the things that banks, certainly in Botswana, have started doing is issuing what's called chip and PIN cards. And they're a lot more difficult to copy. So chip and PIN cards, they're not foolproof. And I've read some research from Cambridge University in the UK that say because they're not foolproof, banks still have an onus and a duty of care. But they are a lot more safer than just the magnetic strip, which is very easy to copy.
Banks have teams of fraud experts and highly sophisticated fraud detection and prevention systems to protect customers from card fraud. Some can even detect and notify a client before the client realizes the fraud has occurred. But banks understand that being a victim of bank card fraud can be upsetting for the customer. Under these circumstances, what are the obligations of the bank and that of the customer?
A bank has a responsibility, just looking in as a customer, I think a bank has a responsibility to make sure the systems they provide for their customers are safe and secure. But I actually took the opportunity to pull out the Bankers Code of Conduct for Botswana, and I believe that all mainstream banks have signed up to this Bankers Code of Conduct. And although it's a voluntary code, what it says is that banks will have safe, secure and reliable banking and payment systems in Botswana. So even the banks themselves acknowledge that they have a responsibility to make sure that they keep our money safe. The problem is that it's a crime. So it's not the bank's fault that criminals are trying to steal our money, but banks do have a responsibility, I think, to make sure that they do everything possible to ensure that the banking system is safe and secure and that the risk is minimal. Having said that, I also think that we need to work in partnership with banks. It's not just their responsibility. As customers, we also have a responsibility to make sure we understand how to keep ourselves safe and how to protect ourselves, and how to help the banks in combating crime. My understanding is that banks here have a very different response. I know one bank that said categorically they will refund customers if fraud has happened on the account in all circumstances, unless there's been gross negligence on the part of the customer. Other banks are doing this voluntarily, so yes, they are refunding customers in most circumstances, but if you actually read the terms and conditions of the card that you signed for, they don't have to. So most banks, if you look at your terms and conditions, will say we are not legally responsible in the case of PIN-based fraud. So if the thief has got your card and your PIN number, they're saying basically it's the customer's responsibility. So it's voluntary at the moment whether or not the bank choose to refund you out of the goodness of their heart, or whether they say no because the PIN was used. It's unfair in that customers don't know what their rights are. So I think, personally, I would like to see some regulations passed in Botswana which set out clearly where is the responsibility. I mean, ultimately, as consumers, we all pay. If banks are making losses due to fraud, the banking fees will go up. So as consumers, all of us will be paying for it. And that's where it comes, I think, back to customer education and making sure people really understand that there's a problem and that ultimately it's costing you money, it's costing me money to pay for other people's losses.
Quick observations made by First Issues and our guest is that some consumers are not very careful when it comes to using their cards, either out of ignorance or just simple carelessness. We would now like to share with you how you can protect yourself from card fraud. Please take note.
I was at a shop last week in Game City, and I actually watched a customer paying in front of me, and I could see him scrolling through his cell phone, obviously looking for his PIN number. What he then did was present the phone to the cashier and said, please enter my PIN number for me. Now in that case, I would say that the customer was totally negligent with their PIN, and had there been a crime occurring and the cashier had skimmed the card, the customer would have been responsible because they gave away their PIN voluntarily. So I think there is a lack of understanding about how to protect yourself. One other interesting thing in the Bankers' Code of Conduct, it says that the banks have a responsibility to assist in protecting their customers, members of the public and themselves against fraud and other misuse thereof, and banks will inform cardholders of their responsibility and expect them to take care in the safekeeping and use of their cards and PINs. I went to 2 banks last week to collect debit cards. Neither bank actually told me anything about card security. I was simply told, here's your card, off you go. So where is the responsibility there in terms of actually educating and taking every opportunity, every time you see a customer, to remind them of their obligation to keep their PIN secure? One of the other ways a customer can minimise the risk to themselves is keeping their daily limits low on a card. Now, most banks will have a daily limit probably of about 5,000 pula, and that's the maximum amount you're allowed to withdraw either in a shop, or it's usually lower for an ATM, usually it's 2,000 pula for an ATM. So what a customer can do is actually make sure they keep their limits low, so that even if your card is stolen, the maximum someone can actually withdraw from your account is negligible. There are things that you can do as a customer to protect yourself. The most important one is to make sure your card never leaves your sight. So when you hand over your card in a store, watch what the staff member's doing with it. If they wander off to use a different point of sale terminal, go with them. You'll see me wandering around supermarkets with people, why are you following me? I'm because you've got my card. I don't let it out of my sight. The second thing you can do is when you enter your PIN number, and this is the most important thing, cover your hand so that you can't, or someone, even if there's a hidden camera or there's someone standing behind you watching, they can't see your PIN number. Never accept help from people at the ATM. What criminals will often do is they'll distract you by saying, oh, there's a problem, or can I help you, or whatever. Meanwhile, they've either stolen your card and giving you a different one back, or they've skimmed your card while you're standing there. So don't accept help at the ATMs. I was looking at some of the banks here, and they do have advice on their websites about card safety. And one of the things the banks say is actually play with the ATM. Pull the place where you put your card in and see if there's something on it. So check the ATM before you stick your card in. Look at the keypad, because one of the other things crooks do is they'll put a false keypad over the actual ATM keypad, so it records the numbers that you press. So again, check that. Use the same ATM regularly, so you get to see the look and feel of it. You'll know if something's gone wrong. If it looks different, don't use it. Make sure you sign up for SMS alerts so that you know what's happening on your account. So you can see immediately if there's a transaction that shouldn't be there, and you can phone the bank. And here comes the other one. Make sure you know the out-of-hours phone number to cancel your card. Imagine now it's 10 o'clock at night, you can see money going through your account and your balance is going down, and you have no idea how to get hold of the bank, so you can't cancel your card. The moment you see something suspicious on your account, rather phone and cancel your card so that nothing else can happen untoward. One of the other tips is if you have large amounts of money, I'm sure there are people that do, don't keep all your money in your salary account. So keep some of it in a savings account and don't link the accounts on your card. So at least if your card is stolen, the criminal won't be able to access your savings account as well as your current account. So I think those are the main tips, but make sure, as a customer, we need to make sure that we know what we're doing and we don't just go around blindly sticking cards in places. For example, an ATM with a blank screen, never ever put your card in. don't enter your PIN until the ATM actually tells you to do so, because often criminals will have used devices that will not prompt you for things, so people just merely press buttons. Meanwhile, the ATM is either not working behind the scenes or they've already recorded your information.
One of the golden rules is to call your bank as soon as you notice or suspect that you have been a victim of bank card fraud. Before we interviewed our guest, we asked her to make calls to all the commercial banks operating in Botswana and test how effective the toll-free and telephone numbers customers are asked to call when suspecting fraud are. The results were not impressive.
Banks don't make it easy. First of all, one of the banks, the number on the front of the very first page of their website, the number was incorrect and the number's no longer in service. So I couldn't call it 24 hours a day. I phoned several other banks. One bank said that I had to call at 9 o'clock when their branch was open because they didn't know the number, even though it was a call centre. Two of the banks told me they don't have a 24-hour service. So if your card gets stolen at 3 o'clock in the morning, you have to wait till 8 o'clock in the morning until you can report it, by which time your bank account is emptied. So my first call is for banks to actually make it easy for customers. Make sure information is readily available and you don't have to search through page and page and page of a website to try and find the information. That's if you even have access to the internet. A lot of customers don't have access to the internet, so how do they get that information? Is it clearly displayed by the ATM so you can go to an ATM and find the out-of-hours contact number? So please make it easy. Let us help you to minimise the risk.
One wonders what the standard practice in other countries is when a client has been a victim of fraud.
I think they're slightly ahead in terms of protection. Both in the UK and USA, there are regulations which require banks to refund a customer after a certain amount. So in the UK, the customer is only responsible for the first £50 of loss unless they've been particularly negligent. And there are customers who are negligent. I was doing some research yesterday on this issue and I was looking at the Banking Adjudicator's website. And one of the cases the Banking Adjudicator here in Botswana reported was that the customer had complained that their card had been, or money had been stolen out of their account. When the bank actually investigated, they found that the customer's boyfriend had taken her card and had stolen her money. So in that case, the bank's not responsible. The customer had given away their PIN number to their boyfriend, he then stole their money. It's not the bank's fault. And I think, we need a balance here. Customers need to accept some responsibility for making sure that they're not negligent. If you give your PIN number to your children or your boyfriend or your auntie or your next door neighbour and they go off and steal your card and go to your or the ATM or to a shop and steal all your money, that's not the bank's fault. You shouldn't have given away your PIN number and you shouldn't have made your card accessible to that person. So I think the message for consumers is that we need to treat our cards like they're cash. You wouldn't leave cash lying around for someone else to pick up. Don't do the same with your card or your PIN. I've seen customers at the ATM and they've actually written their PIN number on the back of the card. Now imagine your handbag's stolen. The criminal's got easy access. All they've got to do is go and put the card in the ATM and they know your PIN number. So in those circumstances, I don't think it's the bank's responsibility. Having said that, I do think the banks are not doing enough to educate consumers. Just this week, we had an email to Consumer Watchdog and the customer was mystified. Their comment was, I checked my bank statement and money had gone missing and the bank said I had to go to the police, but it's a banking system error. They had never heard of card skimming. They didn't know that this is a problem, that criminals are out there actually trying to steal your money. They just thought it was a mistake by the bank. So the banks themselves and the Banking Association in Botswana and the Central Bank of Botswana need to do an awful lot more in making sure that customers are aware of the problem and also understand what they can do to help protect themselves.
Commercial banks are constantly enhancing their security measures and technology is being upgraded to prevent fraud. The recently introduced chip technology for debit and credit card is one such example. But criminals also continue to find ways to stay ahead of the game and continue to alter their bag of tricks. This is one battle that cannot be won by one partner alone. Commercial banks and their customers must come together and support each other in this war, failing which, both of them will end up as losers in a big way. We now continue our series on the stock market with Pepelo Tela of the Botswana Stock Exchange. He tells us how to go about crafting our own investment strategies, and if we are intimidated by going it alone, how to go about engaging the services of a broker. How do I equip myself to formulate my own investment strategies without the assistance of a broker?
You need to look at your needs as an individual. See the amount of money that you have as sort of the money that you won't need in the near future. Look at the level of risk that you want to take. If you want to take more risk, look at the shares that you can go to buy that are a little bit more riskier than the other ones, because within the shares themselves, there's different risk profiles. Make a budget at the end of the month or at the end of the year. Put some money aside, because you can only use money that you won't need in the short term to invest in shares. If you don't need that money, you can come to the stock market and then invest that money. But you can't invest the money that you are going to need next week or next month in the share market. Shares are generally a long-term form of investment, and therefore you only invest the money that you are also prepared to lose.
You've mentioned the word broker quite a bit in our discussions. Could you tell us, what is a broker?
A broker in the context of the Botswana Stock Exchange is somebody who have gone through an examination in the BSE, passed that examination, and he have submitted some other requirements, and then he have been given permission and license to trade as a broker. And these are the people who are allowed to trade on behalf of the investors only. And you need to be very sure that you are dealing with somebody who is very licensed, who is licensed by the exchange. If you are in doubt about whether that broker is genuinely licensed by the BSE, you need to contact the BSE or the Non-Bank Financial Regulatory Authority to check if indeed that is a BSE regulated broker.
How do I select a broker that's right for me?
Normally, as an investor, shop around. Go to all these brokers, see the broker that you think is going to give the level of service that you require. The fees you pay to a broker are negotiable. Negotiate with the first broker, the second broker, the third and the fourth broker, and choose whoever you think gives you value for your money to pay them commission to execute shares for you.
How do I pay for the services that they do give me?
Normally what they do is that they'll require you to deposit money in their account, and then that money will include the price at which you are going to buy shares at, and also the commission that they are going to charge you. And they will normally disclose the amount of money that they are going to charge you as commission.
From me, Nameto Sibina, the team behind First Issues, and our sponsors First National Bank, we wish you a good night and pleasant viewing.